Good evening, everyone. This is Senator Sawar. I am honored here this evening to have an amazing individual, a friend, a teacher, an individual who has been making a difference for many, many years and doing things in a way which, in my opinion, are the prescription for the current time. This is tonight we have Deacon Art Miller, who is a deacon, who is also a radio host, he's an author, he's a revivalist, he's a civil rights leader. I want to say a few things about Art, and I think this will give you a glimpse about about some of the things Art has been doing. He's a nationally known preacher. Anytime there's a challenge in our society, in parts of our country, Art is there for healing the people in the communities. I know his radical love is recognized and respected around the state of Connecticut because we are blessed that he lives in the state of Connecticut in the beautiful town of Windsor. But he actually would show up in Mississippi, in the Gulf Coast after Katrina, Rocky Mountains of northern New Mexico, on the south side of Chicago. Anytime there's a challenge, people seek him and ask him to come and help them out, understand how do we move forward, what do we need to do. And this is something that's a blessing that we have somebody of that capacity, that gifts that he has and he's willing to share with us. Art grew up on the south side of Chicago in the 1940s to 1950s. And when he was about 10 years old in 1955, his schoolmate, Emmett Till, who was 14 years of age, brutally murdered in Mississippi. And this incident was the time where there was energized activity in the movement for the civil rights movement. If we were to look at one big impact on the civil rights movement during that time, it was the brutal murder of Emmett Till. Art's book, the Journey to Chatham, is Why Emmett Till Murdered Changed America, a personal story he wrote in 2005. I was fortunate to read it in 2007, as soon as I had met Art around that time. And I was just so touched by him and his personality and his wisdom. I read his book and I was touched about his experience and how he has shared that with us. That is something anybody who is interested to learn about what happened in the 1955 time and then compared to current times, it's important to know this. Anytime there's a civil rights issue, any part of the world, Art is there to speak about it. He is the Hartford Archdiocese representative to this Connecticut Coalition to Save Darfur. That was a group specifically to influence the state, national, and international officials, an institution to use the public clout to stop the conflict in Darfur, Sudan. He's worked around ways to help humans each other. Art, I could speak forever about my friend, my teacher, but I want to have everybody have an opportunity to hear from Art about some of the things. And I wanted to start off with a question, and then after that we can have Art speak to us. So Art, you experienced, you knew Emmett Till. He was part of the community where you were growing up. You were a young individual who experienced that murder of somebody you knew, somebody who was close to your family, and here we are with Floyd in 2020. Can you walk us through this journey that we as America have had and the journey that you have had? Thank you for being here.
Well, Senator Dr. Saud, my dear friend, your words about the things that I've done in my life and continue to try to do sometimes reflect more than I think I am. I am honored truly to be and to call myself your friend. We have spent a lot of time together, and I've enjoyed it, and I thank you for your simplicity and your love. Growing up in Chicago back so long ago, I I don't know if I can truly compare how I was and how I lived to anything that exists today. Let me make it clear. My older brother actually sat next to Emmett Till in school, and I only really knew Emmett because our moms knew one another. But more importantly, my older brother knew him very very well, and I recall the morning that we heard that Emmett Till had been murdered. We were actually in our summer home in Michigan, and it was early morning, and I had not yet gotten up, and I heard my brother scream, and it was a scream I had never heard come from my brother. And I quickly jumped up and ran to the kitchen where he was enfolded in my mother's arms and crying hysterically, and my mother was comforting him. And I, as a little 10-year-old boy, didn't understand what had happened. And it caused my older brother, who was in fact my hero, to be so bitterly weeping. And the words came out, um, Emmett had been murdered. And for a 10-year-old child, I never understood how that could possibly happen. I knew that old people died, grandparents, but young people never were supposed to die. I had heard about murder on our little 8-inch TV, but I had never thought that that could happen. And when we returned to Chicago after the end of August, when he had died, it appeared the whole town, the whole city was weeping. Um, it it was a pall over the community, and it was something I had never experienced before. It was the time that my mom and my dad sat us down to tell us what it meant to be Black in America. Now, we knew that we were little Negro boys, but we were living in Chicago, and in Chicago, it was completely segregated. So everything that we knew was Black. Our dentist, attorneys, the hospital where I was born was a Black hospital. Everything was Black. A milk company, the ice cream company, the insurance companies. And so we had no understanding what it meant to be in a country where we, by the virtue of the hatred for who we are and who we were, brought about a ghost of hate that we were going to have to carry. And from that moment on, that ghost of hate has followed me in my life and every Black person that I know. And I call it a ghost of hate because it is unseen by anyone who does not have the same color skin. It is a ghost of hate because it moves and is sometimes quite heavy and sometimes lifts, but is always there. And that journey through all of the killings and all of the years, when I was in the armed services and experienced it, when I was fighting for the rights of others and the rights that I did not enjoy when I came home, that ghost of hate was always there. From the slaughter, from the insults from police officers, when my wife was trying to buy her wedding dress, she was met by someone who didn't think she should buy a wedding dress. It was everything, a constant bitterness. When I remember when I came home from the Army in 1970, and I had not been home in 3 years, I tried to catch a cab after I got to Chicago, and the cabs kept passing me by, even though I was in uniform. Finally, how ironic, A white police officer saw it, jumped in front of a cab, and made him take me home. Um, they wouldn't pick me up because I was a black man. And this white officer in 1970 corrected that error. So I would tell you that I have found and seen glimpses of hope. Um, and now with this death of George Floyd, the thing that has made it so extraordinary is that there has been this convergence of elements that has caused it to burst forth. It is so ironic, it is so mystical that we would find ourselves in a place where the soul of America was ready. It had been primed to come out and scream, no more. No more can we endure this. And it took someone kneeling on the neck of a man to, to release the voice of the people. Today and yesterday, where I am the deacon in a Catholic church. And it is a very white community, and people don't like to hear the word elitist, but if you're very wealthy and it's very homogeneous completely, or 90% white, the per capita income is very, very high. The children there wanted to have a Black Lives Matter rally. I went both there and to Avon, Connecticut, a similar town today, and there were hundreds of white kids with signs yelling, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. I was astounded because just 5 years ago, I was arrested for saying Black Lives Matter and sitting in the street. And you know about that because you were on your way to sit next to me. And that time, people hated the Black Lives Matter movement. But now all of these kids have captured that idea, that the recognition that when we say Black Lives Matter, it has nothing to do with white people. It's not saying you don't matter. It is not saying that at all. What it is saying is that we matter. And if I have to say two, then you just don't get it. And I refuse to say Black Lives Matter too. If you can't handle Black Lives Matter, then get in the back of the line, because I refuse at this point in my life to explain myself to folks. If it is not evident to you of what happened to George Floyd and those who happened before him, from the young man Abner who was jogging, or that bird watching man in the in the in park the park in New York City, where the woman weaponized her race and said, I will tell the police that an African American man is accosting me. And he wasn't doing anything, but she weaponized it. That is the ghost of hate. Knowing that someone can do that to you. And I know, Saud, you know what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Art. Thank you so much. How does one talk to children? And if there are two parts to this, how do you talk as African American parents? How would you talk to the children about what's going on? And how would one talk to non-African American children, white children, or the brown children and Asian American children? How do you have a conversation about what's going on in our community, in our state, in our country?
Um, Most people have heard about the talk, the talk that Black parents have with their sons primarily, but also their daughters. And that talk consists of telling them how to react when the police stop them. And parents use the term when, never if, but when they do, so that child will be prepared to never move quickly. Do not reach for your phone, your wallet, your insurance papers, nothing. Just sit there and do not move. Say yes, sir, no, sir. Keep your hands on the steering wheel up on top. Do not move. If, in fact, they tell you to get out of the car, you say, yes, sir, may I call my parents? And do not use the phone until they say yes. If they tell you no, just get out of the car. Do not let them drag you out. No matter what, you say and do nothing unless you ask to call my parents or can I call my attorney, period. It is the talk that we always have because I'm more afraid for my sons with the police than I have been with gangs. What white parents can do is have that talk. Tell them this is what black parents tell their children. You live in an environment where you don't have to know that. But what black parents also tell their children, if they're playing with white kids, you cannot do what they do. If they want to get into mischief, do not go. If they want to throw rocks, you walk away. No matter anything they suggest you do that might be mischievous and just little pranks, you cannot do. And if the police come, never, ever run. No matter your fear, do not run. Parents who are white have to tell their children what happens in the black community, what black children have to go through, and what they're taught. Only when these kids begin to understand that there is this unearned disadvantage that black children are imparted with, this ghost of hate, will they become true allies. I know, Saud, that people who don't have our experience, they cannot understand. And I don't ask people to understand. What I try to do is draw a comparative. And the best comparative I have is that my wife and I have been married for 48 years, almost 49 years. And when our four children, when they were born, we were excited, of course, but I went to every Le Mans class they had, every course and class I could take to help my wife during her pregnancy. If she wanted some kind of crazy stuff at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd get up and I'd go find it because we were living in Chicago and it doesn't close. When she got sick from morning sickness or whatever it might be, I would clean up the bathroom, get a cold uh, washcloth for her neck and her forehead, and get her back to bed. When the babies were born, I was there to make certain that she was okay. But if I ever told my wife I understood what it meant to be pregnant, she'd smack me in my mouth. I don't understand, but I can bear witness. I know she was in pain. I could feel and be with her. And this is the human being I love more than any human being in the world, and I can't understand. But what I can do is be there for us. What we need for our white brothers and sisters to do is to bear witness. I don't want you to understand because you can't. But understand you can't understand, and that's okay. But you must bear witness to our pain. If I were to say to my wife, oh, that doesn't hurt that much, get over it, I would be divorced. It is what I hear. Well, that was a long time ago. My wife was married, well, we were more 40, but when she was pregnant, she has been able to move on, but I will never dismiss that pregnancy.
I think this is the best way anybody could have explained this. I have had nobody explain it in this manner, and this sort of is humbling because our human reaction is to try to understand and then to empathize. And empathy is something that's unfortunately lacking in our society. And I want to empathize, but the reality is, I can begin to do it. I can be witness to it, but I will never be able to understand it and experience it the way you have experienced it, or my other African American brothers and sisters have experienced it. And
Exactly. And that's okay. It's kind of like when my wife and I go on a vacation, she will see things that I can't see and she'll share it with me so that I am better for wherever we go, because I can see things through her experience. So we're close enough where I see things through your experience. And it makes me such a better human being. And so I bear witness with you.
amen. So how can one be a good ally? Everybody's heart is there. I have yet to see anybody who is actually not willing to step and stand with our African brothers and sisters. And thankfully, we live in a state where it's easy to find people who are willing to stand up next to you and next to African American sisters at this time as well. What can they do to be the best allies? And these are non-elected officials, because I'm going to come to the elected officials in a second.
Well, for me, what an ally can do is be an ally when I ain't there. Now, what I mean by that is that they have found this truth, and this truth does not depend on my presence. For example, what I told the rally today was that this summer, once this, hopefully this summer, if not this summer, this fall, if and when this the coronavirus has been expiated and is gone, they're going to be at house parties or at school, or Christmas. Their old Aunt Gertrude or Uncle Larry will be there, and they'll have too much of that special punch, and then they'll start talking about, well, how those old black people are, and those Muslims are, those gay people, or those Chinese, or those whatever, Jews, or whatever it may be. It is at that moment you stand up and say, not in my house. And if you're at someone else's house, I'm sorry, I got to go, because I will not hear nor put up with hatred. If you are in school, in the bathroom, somebody starts talking smack like that, say, not here, not in my house. Be an ally when I'm not looking at you. Understand that the support we need comes from the change of the community and the society. And if that change has to come from the very root of who that human being is, if it is your mother or your great grandmother, your nana, your pop, and if they say what is wrong, it is wrong. And you must be an ally when I'm not there.
Art, one of the biggest challenge with this pandemic is I can't hug you.
I love you,
I
brother.
just want to hug you right now.
Yeah,
You're just
thanks, man.
so much of wisdom. It's just like you say these things, and then it's just like, oh, I needed to listen to this part. And then, so being an ally means being there when you are not there, to stand up for you and then draw a line and not let your quote unquote loved ones be racist, bigots,
Absolutely.
and act in a wrong.
When I'm there, you know, I'm gonna speak up for myself. But it'd be nice if you stood there and said yes. But it is so vital that you change the culture in which you live.
Yeah, amen. What can lawmakers do, like in the state at least, to begin with, and we can have local in the towns and then in the state. What are the responsibilities that we have at this?
Uh, you know, in my life, people have often said, "Have you ever thought of running for office?" And my response has always been, "Nah, man, I don't like pleasing too many people." Uh, it's one of the things I couldn't be I couldn't do what you do. I don't have the patience for it. Um, but what they can do, um, in my opinion, is to always embrace the truth that the most important part of our lives is the truth. I'd rather be fired um, because I told the truth than keep my job because I tolerated a lie. What is necessary is to represent the truth and the truth from your community. But first, the people have to know your truth. If you are hired, it is because you represent your truth. And they say, okay, we want that truth in the legislature. And then you cannot go against the truth that you had said you'd be there. And if they change and you don't want to change, then I got to go. And that sounds difficult because I've never been in your shoes. But I do know this. As a person of the church, where there are rules, I have often prayed that God will stretch the edges of my love, that it not be bound to anyone's man-made laws, but they coincide with what God causes me to do. And if they work together, then fine. You see, an unjust law is not a law. An unjust law is not God's law. An unjust law causes human beings to be less than. An example is the laws of segregation. The laws of segregation were the law, but it was an unjust law. And because it was an unjust law, it had to be changed. Those are the things that how we have to bring truth.
Here's what I'm a chair of the housing committee. We are as segregated as we would have been past. If you look at the numbers in the state of Connecticut, majority of the African Americans live on 2% of the land. Two-thirds of African Americans, two-thirds of Latinos live in low opportunity areas.
Yes.
And the state, my fellow legislators would not pass a law to fix that. I have been fighting for the time I've been here, but they would fight tooth and nail, and they said they will filibuster this. They will not pass any single law if any of the law that would be desegregating laws would come in the state of Connecticut. I dealt with it in 2019, and I kept looking at the calendar. I said, which year am I in and who am I talking to? And this is the reality that we are facing. And to me, what has happened with George Floyd is a symptom of all that is wrong. It's a part of the policies. It is a systemic situation that we're dealing with. How do we address that in a state like Connecticut, where we as legislators, there's one group of people who are pretty much committed to not doing it at all, and another group of people partially doing it?
Mm.
How do we reconcile, and can this moment be a movement which we would actually make sure that such legislators would pursue careers other places if they are not to be able to do what is right for moral reasons and for the functioning of the society?
In 1955, when Emmett Till was murdered, there was no um, Voting Rights Act. In 1954, the Brown versus the Board of Education had occurred in 53. In 1954, it was to be implemented, but the implementation was coupled with this notorious statement by all deliberate speed that they would change it, but segregation continued. It continues to today. So it is not something that will happen quickly. It took 10 years from 1955 to 1965 before the Voting Rights Act had occurred. But it was that single occurrence of Emmett Till's murder, because see, there are a whole lot of people who got murdered before Emmett Till. And the question becomes, why did this singular murder begin that civil rights movement? And again, it was this convergence of circumstances that have made that occur, from not only the Geneva Convention and the Iron Curtain, but a number of different issues in America's fight with Russia and the Cold War. And all of these things came to the moment, and President Eisenhower had to do something. We are in a similar circumstance. and that there's this extraordinary thing that's occurring. And one of the things I have seen in the last few days are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people, 18, 17, 16, 15 years old, who are filled with this vibrance of freedom. Old folks better look out, because they coming. And they're coming with a heart of hope, a heart of trust, where they are saying, this can no longer exist. I'm going to share this one little thing with you. I saw yesterday or day before when I was at a rally with it's all kids. And a young woman walked up and said, "Hi, Deacon Art." And she took her mask off because I couldn't recognize her. And it was a young woman who was now 22 with a degree in ecological sciences. And she was my little altar server 10 years ago. And she looked and said, "Thank you, Deacon Art, for helping me and helping me change my life." I don't know how that happened. And maybe there are many, many, many more that are awakening just because there are people like you and I around who are opening their eyes. And this is the part that those who are saying no, know that they will not alter laws that harm people, these laws of segregation and nullification and disinheritance. They're going to be standing on the wrong side of justice. And when history comes, they will have to look at who they are and what they've done and recognize their names are going to go down as those segregationists. And that's what they'll have to live with.
Wow. Wow. So profound. Well, I am included in the people whose life you've changed.
Oh,
So, uh, I think here's, there's some interesting things that we are seeing with the current peaceful demonstrations. The peaceful demonstrations have resulted in situations where there have been videos that I have actually come across on various ways that there are people who are infiltrating, who are not necessarily part of the movements by their appearance, who are
yeah,
creating riots and
yeah,
destruction of property. But then there are people who are within the demonstrations who are actually who are African Americans who may be also involved in destruction of property. How does one reconcile with this emotional outburst that we are seeing from people, and what can you help me understand
yeah.
what's
I
going on?
One of the most disconcerting things for anyone who has dedicated their lives to peace are those who would do the opposite. And I don't make excuses. Do I understand maybe to some degree the frustration of years and years and years? The whole idea of this country saying, essentially, I'm going to get mine, because that is the idea of materialism in America, is I'm going to get mine, to heck with my neighbor. That is what we've constructed with so many of our children, and so much of our society is this rugged individualism, is that I am going to be this person and I'm going to get whatever I can get. Those are the ones who could not who care less about the community. And the community is trying to lift itself up, where those who have believed in this ideal of rugged individualism are going to get their own, and to hell with the community. I believe the community will rise. I believe the community of police officers, 90% of them, of that community, is doing what's right. But they too have that 10%, like the officer who knelt on the neck, or the ones who have accosted me. Those are the ones who also riot. And so if we could get those who have this idea that they're going to get theirs, and those 10% of police officers who are just as destructive, we could put them on a boat and let them go someplace. But as it is now, the community has to continue to do what it's doing. And I have seen videos where many of those within the community are trying to stop others from doing the destructive aspect of it. It has not always worked, and I am sorry. And when I go to every rally I've ever been to, and if there would have ever been anyone trying to besmirch the idea of peace within that community that has been handed down through the generations, I would have put my body between whatever they're trying to destroy in their arm.
I think one of the challenges in the current times is that we are trying to keep the social distancing, and then this human touch is missing. It's just like you want to be out there, you want to hug people and say, "Look, I am there for you," and you
Yeah,
cannot
yeah.
physically touch the people. And it's just like add to the pain, if you will.
I'm a hugger, and this has
Yes,
been this has been one of the most difficult parts for me personally, is not to feel the spirit of the human being that I am hugging, to feel their heartbeat beat under their chest, to know that my light seeks their light. And that is the difficult part. But I can see their light in their eyes. Even with the mask, you can see the person's smile. And, that has to be enough for now because I love them enough not to hug
yes, yes. That's a very important message too. You're absolutely right.
them. Yeah.
I'm worried about the doctor in me is really worried about the spread of the infection because we have an obligation to be out there, but we also have an obligation to be very careful when we are out there because
Yeah.
we can't afford
Yeah.
for the community to be sick and being unwell.
Yeah, it's not been easy. My wife is very concerned whenever I go out, so I've been videotaping it to prove that I've not shaken anyone's hand or hugged anyone.
Yes, yes. That's why we're doing this. Otherwise, I'll be there
Amen.
with you. And so I just saw today one of the because I was involved in standing up a rally and speaking up about it. And I got a journalist write bad things about me because I was out there and speaking. And it's like, how do people go to sleep at night? That they're having a problem because people are standing up and saying, look, this is not right. And there enough of them out there. That's a personal question. How do I deal with that? Because it's like, really,
Well,
are we having this
you're
conversation and
not
you're
doing it right
publishing?
if everybody happy. Man, if a demonstration and a protest is you protesting against something, and it's that something someone thinks is better. So heck, if I'm not ticking people off, I ain't doing it right. So man, let them write. Shoot, every time that happens, man, that's your red badge of courage.
Yes.
Shoot. I would imagine that there are going to be people going to be all ticked off about things we said today. And if they're not, then we didn't say enough stuff to irritate and get people to move.
Amen. I love that.
Yeah.
So this is good. What I will do is I'm going to try to take a few questions that are coming to us.
Oh,
One of
sure.
them came from Jamie and wants to know your thoughts on the fragility of the language used to speak about racial injustice and says sometimes we talk past each other because we understand terms differently.
Yes. Jamie, thank you. Address it. The best thing to do in any moment of communication, to be communicative, is to say, there is this thing I want to say to you, but I don't want to offend you, nor do I want to be offensive. So can I explain what I want to say? If in fact you approach someone recognizing that there might be a barrier to your communication, it affords them the opportunity to be able to open their heart to whatever you have to say. Now, if you have done everything you can to have um, interaction with someone and they refuse to, go to the next person. And then if that, then just keep going. And I learned that much of my work in the community, in impoverished communities, is when I have had to work with people who have addictions. And the first few times when people would go back on their addictions, I thought I had done something wrong. until someone said, Art, your ego is out of the moon, man. You're not saving everybody. You might be the ninth voice out of 12 they need to hear. So just be happy that you are the ninth voice. That person may not hear you, but they may hear the person after you. Your objective is to never stop.
Mm, that's great. Good, good. That's profound again. And there's Shazia who said she wants to know more about the Tulsa riots and the Watts rebellion. I don't.
Yeah. Well, Tulsa, Oklahoma, back, I think it was the 1921. In Tulsa, there was this very vibrant Black community it was called the Black Wall Street. And it was prosperous. It was all Black, much like my community in Chicago. And supposedly, young Black men had accosted a young white woman. And it was never proven one way or the other. But there was a white riot accompanied by the police and the KKK, and they destroyed it. That whole community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with over 300 Black people killed, and it is called that. The Watts riots occurred in I think it was 1964, and it is called the Watts Uprising. And it too was at the end of a police officer, and I can't remember which one. It was not one of the others. This was in the mid '60s, and I remember I had just been arrested from a everyone. I have been arrested a few times, but they've all been.
Wasn't there for that one.
Yeah, you weren't. Yeah, it was before you were born. It was. Yeah, Dr. King had called some people together because of segregation in Chicago, and it was right after that, right after the "I Have a Dream" speech. So,
Yeah. Wow. So, Art, you're a man of radical love, and then there's only one way to finish darkness is through light. Can you share a story or more about how, through the radical love, you were able to change the hearts and minds of people?
so I hate how hate makes me feel. It takes up parts of me that are dark and don't grow. And I had to learn for my own health and mental health and heart and the love I have for people and my profound love for God, not to hate. And after I learned not to hate, um, the only other option to feel, there's the old physics statement that nature abhors a vacuum and that it will fill it at any cost. And so I had to fill the vacuum of hate that had left with something else, and all it could be filled with was love. And so this love has caused me to grow. And it doesn't mean that I'm not guarded, but what it means is that's what I lead with. I lead with love. And sometimes it's rejected, but it will not cause me to hate. It just causes me to hold on to it, because the most important thing I have to be is vulnerable. I cannot be close to God if I am not vulnerable. With a vulnerable heart, God can move my heart and kindle within me a spirit of love. If I close my heart to defend against pain, then the love wasn't big enough. And that's the only solution I have for living in this world. Now, there are people who do things that cause me not to love them as much as I'd like to, but I am not going to hate anybody, period.
I don't know how you have this way with words. It's just like they flow and then they come from the heart. It's just like tongue and heart. It's just one smooth path. I love it. Andrew says, we whites think MLK changed white America's heart. Did he?
Yes, Dr. King didn't come to change black people. He was happy with black people. He came to change white people. I mean, that was the objective. The objective wasn't to change black people. He loved black people. He came to change white people's attitudes. You know, one of the strangest things that I always hear, and your viewers, your listeners can hear this. When Emmett Till was murdered, it is said he was murdered because he was black and he whistled at a white woman. He wasn't murdered because he was black or whistled at a white woman. He was murdered because that community tolerated hate. If they didn't hate, they wouldn't have killed him. How are they putting it on? How are they going to put it on the victim? He was the victim. He didn't have anything to do with his murder. It was solely, completely on those who murdered him. And it was their hate-filled heart that caused them to kill that little boy. Now, I am convinced there had to be one or two good people in that little town of Money, Mississippi that had 2,000 people in it. I'm certain, I'm convinced there were one or two good white people who knew it was wrong. But those other 1,998 people, they hated so much, those two people found out that they were on the wrong side of justice. And theirs is the pain that they got to live with. My question to those who are listening is, where will you be standing when righteousness and justice converge? Will you have stood up for what is right, or will you allow this society to tell you what you think?
Wow. Yes. I've got another one. Jenny says, I'm a social studies teacher in South Bronx. There are so many events in this country to reach the plight of Black Americans. In your opinion, what would the top few we must absolutely cover for our youth to know?
Oh my gosh.
The
Tell them
question.
who Crispus Attucks is, and why Crispus Attucks is not celebrated. Now, those of you who don't know, Crispus Attucks was the first person to die for America. He was the one who was at the Boston Massacre, and he was a black man. The first person to die for America was Crispus Attucks. And I want you to go find the, the, the statues. I want you to go find the schools that are named after him. I want you to go find the parks and then explain to your students why Crispus Attucks' name is not everywhere, and get them to begin the process of saying, no, we're going to change the name of this school to Crispus Attucks, or we're going to change the name of that park. We're going to do something. There's an old African proverb that says, when you pray, move your feet. And what that means is, after you pray, don't you be waiting to let God do something. You better get your little narrow butt out there and start working. So you tell those children, here's the truth. Now, what are you going to do? Let them own it.
Yes.
Hallelujah. You got me
Absolutely.
going, brother.
I love this. Thank you for taking the time. Now, I'm still trying to have a better handle on, look, with this pandemic. Now, before this whole thing, I was looking at the post-pandemic policy changes in Chicago and South Chicago. An African American is 7 times more likely to die than a white American.
Yeah.
In Connecticut, the numbers are not as far off, but they are still unacceptably high for the African Americans. And that again to me was a symptom of all that is wrong with our healthcare system and the policies. And we sort of have this perfect form that for the injustice, social injustice perspective, that the social injustice is harming one community and few communities far more than others. And at the same time, the same community is target of a hate crime or murders. This is we need to go back to the drawing board in a significant manner, but everybody says, well, it has to be incremental. And I can't understand incrementalism versus
Yeah.
fixing the problem.
Um, and you know better than I, but many of the diseases that afflict Black people are physiological. I had spoken to you about that ghost of hate. That ghost of hate causes high blood pressure. That ghost of hate causes anxiety. All of these physiological, symptomatic, uh, not symptomatic, but physiological diseases, many can be healed if we were to lift the weight that the Black community carries, this subjectivity to racism, to institutionalized racism, causes a heavy heart. And if this has happened over hundreds of years, I'm just a I'm surprised we're not all dead. I am surprised that we get to live as long as we do, considering that what we have endured. I am amazed that Black people can live and breathe and prosper as well as we can, given what we have to carry. One of the things that I have noticed is that and I may be way off, so this is a supposition. I am something I'm very interested in and I have yet to study. And I ask you to look at it as well. In some of the uh, Caribbean countries, they have already gotten rid of some of these diseases. And in these Caribbean countries, they were brought over from Africa the same time that we were, that those were African Americans. However, their enslavement ended earlier and they became the captains of their own boats. And so the incidence of this pandemic has not affected them as negatively as it does African Americans. And then you begin to look at places where there's greater oppression, like Mississippi or Alabama. I'd be interested in seeing the difference between the dynamics of this disease on people who live in deeply urban areas and people who live like where I do in the suburbs. Is there this physiological difference? Because one of the things I don't carry, I do carry this ghost of hate to the store, but I don't carry it in my neighborhood. I'm not afraid of any kind of danger or any of that. That is, I'd be really interested in studying. And maybe that could be the end result of dynamic governmental change.
I'll share from the public health perspective, and this is what I fight at times. There are food deserts in our state. There,
Yes,
one cannot have healthy food in parts of our state. A part of Hartford, you look at Bridgeport, you look at New Haven. These communities will not be able. It's not easy to get fresh, healthy vegetables,
yes,
and so that's one thing that we have. So the opportunity for healthy living is lower, and it's by design. Unfortunate, you can get a sugary drink and
yes,
much more easily in those places. The other thing, the very interesting study that somebody did, which showed that the lifespan of a child is determined by the distance from their school to a tobacco outlet.
mm,
If you look at the inner city areas, the tobacco outlets are literally around every school, every corner, and that's part of it. And then you say the weight of a child, the BMI, the body mass index is just related to how our fast food is from the school.
yes,
And so the cards are stacked up against the moment is born,
absolutely,
not because of the policies. And it's just like we have created, and the policies are a social construct,
yes.
and construct and say from day one we actually are making it much more difficult for people. And guess who's losing? America is losing because we are losing on the workforce. Other fascinating
Absolutely,
studies that showed was that they showed that the children, when they're moved from a low opportunity area and brought to a high opportunity area, their capacity to succeed is similar to a child who maybe have been successful for generations. And
Yes.
so we are
You know,
losing
one of
lawyers, doctors, and engineers, and IT specialists, Einsteins, you name it.
one of the things that I point out frequently is that my brother who sat next to Emmett Till, he used to say, "Oh, did you
I
disappear?
can see you.
Can
No,
you
no, you're
still?"
still here.
Okay. One of the, I'm sorry, I touched my thing, my computer. One of the things that my brother told me was that Emmett was really very bright, and that, there was some kind of competition about who would get the best grades. Now, my brother ended up going to West Point. He ended up getting his PhD in nuclear engineering. He ended up, after West Point, he was in Vietnam and he saved two men's lives, and he received the bronze medal. He went on to be the Assistant Secretary of Energy, as well as the lead scientist, the director of all science and technology at Los Alamos, New Mexico. He had 2,000 PhD scientists that reported to him. So, with that in mind, Emmett Tills had asked my brother to go to Money, Mississippi with him. And my mom and dad said no. If he had gone, and he would have been killed along with Emmett Till. Those two men in Vietnam would be dead. He would never have been the nuclear scientist that he was. But the other side of that, we don't know what Emmett Till could have done. He may have healed and cured cancer, all of the things he could have done. You see, what hate does, it kills hope. It kills ideas. It kills dreams. It kills future. And it's killing America.
I've got one more question. This will be our last question, and then we'll have you have a closing statement. So June asks, how can we love people who we see in power who are oppressing and hurting others?
That is one of the challenges, because I will not allow those that are horrible to make me hate them. I cannot allow hatred within me, which means for the persons who are afflicting my country with hatred and division and the rest of that, I work doubly hard to make certain that that kind of ugliness does not exist within my realm of influence. And I do not spend time hating them, because all it does is make me less. And I will not give them that right.
Wow. You're very clear about these things. I just love how
Well, when you
you.
get to be old, Saud, you may as well.
No, this is beautiful, because if the glass is full, then there's no room for the glass to have anything else.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I filled it with love. And I
Yes,
won't let hatred empty it.
yes. And I
So
think
for the
that's,
person who
yeah,
called in, um, look, your love is more precious than that hatred. Understand how precious your love is. You can live on that. You die on hatred.
and the fact that when you were a young boy who saw the ugly face of hate at a very formative time, and you have filled yourself with love and changed so many people around you. It's just a gift that is keeps. So that should be one big beautiful message to people, that there is another way and there's another future, and that future, you fight rights, but spread the love that your rights through having the people humanize and love the beauty of the inner human that each and every one of us so
Amen, brother.
do you want to say something as we come to the end of the hour?
Um, and don't ever give up. Don't ever, ever give up. It, if you move because someone won't change, it isn't because you gave up. You just weren't the one. Plant the seeds wherever you go and let somebody else do the watering. That's all we can do. And I ask that whomever you worship as God, may that God imbue you with a love that you never thought that you could experience. And if you ever get a chance, if I'm in your town, if I'm in your state, please come see me. And I ask that the God that you worship, the God that I worship, love you completely and keep you safe.
Thank you
And
so much. Thank
uh,
you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Amen. And
okay,
I just,
amen. And please tell your sons they better get back to the mosque. Amen.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love you, brother.
Love you so much. Love you too. You take care. Thank you
You too.
everyone for joining us. And this is so much needed. You are a healer. Thank you. Thank you, Art.
All righty. Peace.
Take care.